Welcome to Playing Above the Line, where we interview entrepreneurs, business owners, and community activists to get their thoughts and perspectives on leadership. Playing Above the Line is sponsored by Aviso Group, a business consulting and accounting firm focused on preparing clients for the future through innovation and positive growth. Welcome to Playing Above the Line. I'm Alan, your host, and we are in a different location today. Producer Carrie, we are actually in Brewton. We've come to Escambia County to be able to accommodate the schedule of some of our guests, and so our first guest today in our first recording session of our little 3 recording session that we're doing is David Jennings. And so, David, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about this.
Yeah, well, I'm excited you could come. And the reason I wanted to have you, and I know we'll talk about this more later, but you're a newly elected member of the Brewton City Council, and
Yes.
so won that election in August, and we're installed in
The
November?
first week in November. November
Okay.
10th, I think, was the day that we got sworn in.
So a couple of months now. So I know that your passion for Brewton, I know that it's palpable, and so I want to talk about that. But one of the main reasons I wanted to have you is that I know personally that throughout your life, your younger days playing sports and whatnot, and even as an adult, you had some great influences. And I'm talking about people, and I hate to name names, but I'm going to. Frank Cotton, Mike Sasser, Jim Hart, Alan Baker, Jamie Riggs. I mean, you can go, I know you'll have some more that you want to add to that list, but I know that you learned a lot from those guys, right? That's one of the reasons I wanted to have you, is to be able to come and kind of talk about that. So we'll do that. So before we get into leadership, tell us your story. What about Brewton? What about these people has had an impact on you?
I am a proud product of Brewton, Alabama.
Yeah.
I love this place. Love the dirt, love the people. I love it all. Born here, I'm going to die here.
Yeah.
I had the great fortune of growing up 2 blocks away from Terra Miller High School. My mother was a teacher there. She was a career teacher at the high school, taught history classes. So my backyard was the Terra Miller campus. Of course, this is back in the 70s as a smaller child, and things were much different. You could kind of come and go as you please. Yeah. I remember being on second hall at times where I wasn't supposed to be on second hall. I think I actually took American history in the 3rd grade for about a week. And I don't think you can get away with that anymore. But
Yeah, probably not.
I was influenced greatly by the people in and around that campus, primarily coaches and teachers. But the very first person who kind of grabbed me and made a mark on me was Paul Best.
Okay.
And he was a volunteer. He any kid that grew up in the 70s and 80s and played any of the sports played for Coach Best. Football, basketball, and baseball. And one of the things that struck me, and I was aware of this as a 10-year-old, he had 2 daughters. So he didn't have to be out there. You know, he chose to be out there. He thought he had something to give. And I'll always remember thinking, this man worked from 8 to 5, and now he's out here at 8:30 and 9 o'clock with us, chasing balls, kicking balls, catching balls, whatever it is. Yeah. And his demeanor and the way he went about things made a big mark on me. I would like to think that I took some of that with me and spread it as I got into that.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest mark it made on me was the fact that he volunteered. There was no paycheck that came with that.
Right.
So when I graduated high school at 18, Coach Roch was good enough, and he probably shouldn't have done it, but he gave me a team as an 18-year-old. So I'm sitting here coaching 15-year-olds as an 18-year-old, which can be a little dicey. And it was.
Yeah.
I was certainly a much different coach as a 30-year-old than I was as an 18-year-old. But I knew that I wanted to be in and be a part of the community and give something back. As an 18-year-old, I didn't have a whole lot to give back because I was still kind of trying to find my way, so to speak. But Coach Best was probably the first person that had an impact like that on me. And, of course, you mentioned several of the coaches, the teachers that came after that, and all of them were just special, special men. And, through the years, I guess I've been involved with it in some capacity for 27 years now, recreation in our community. Yeah. I did have my 6-year stint at Auburn. Did in a degree. I finally got out.
Squeezed 4 years into 6 years.
Yeah, it can be the best 6 years of your life if you let it. But minus that, being here, I've always tried to be involved. Yeah. And I've coached thousands of kids. And I can say, for the most part, the only one I've ever mistreated was my son. And I think you can attest to that. You saw some of that.
Saw it firsthand.
And the rest of them, I never coached any kid the same because they're all different.
Right.
I think that's the beauty of it. You go out there and you have all these different personalities and different skill sets and different talents, and you find a way to make it work. One of the things I enjoy the most is the team building and the teamwork side of it. I was always, I thought, a better teammate than I ever was individual talent. I didn't care for tennis, wasn't much of a bowler. I liked working with a group to try to attain, what we had set out to attain. Yeah. And, of course, you can't do that without great leadership, and we certainly had it back in the day, and we enjoy it now in our community. The guys I got to play for, I took something from every one of them.
Yeah.
And it was all a little bit different. You know, from Coach Reich, I remember probably the thing that sticks with me the most about Coach Reich was the attention to detail. You know, the little things really matter. You know, I'm kind of putting my fingers an inch apart. That doesn't yield an inch. It yields this. If you'll pay attention to that, because the other guy won't. And I remember being 9 years old at Little League Baseball, and Coach Reich was the umpire behind home plate. He said, "Gent, you going to play for me when you get in high school?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I am." He said, "If you don't tuck that shirt tail in, you won't." And I said, "Time out." Shirt tail went in, and I knew then that was important. You know, you make a first impression once. That was very important to Coach Reich. And he instilled that in all of us. I'm not the only one that took that away. If you had any of Coach Reich's former guys up there, they would tell you the little stuff matter. You know, Coach Baker, probably the thing that stood out to me most about him was repetition and quality repetition, doing it right over and over and over again. I remember being 16 and 17 years old out there on the football field long after practice has been finished for the rest of the team, and our position group is still out there doing things and drills that you thought were mundane, but when it came to Friday night, you could just play because you had muscle memory.
Yeah.
He was very big on doing it right. He would rather you do it right fewer times than do it wrong a bunch of times and say you had done it a bunch of times. So that was one of the things that he really instilled in us, and I thought that mattered as equally as what Coach Reich passed along. Coach Sasser was more about toughness, and not just physical toughness, mental toughness. You know, I remember one of the things that he said, and I've used it in every one of my discussions with teams I've ever coached. I remember Coach Sasser saying, "How long can you tread water?" And we would answer, you know, an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. And he says, "You know what happens when you quit treading water? You die." So you tread water as long as you got to, and hope that helps, and understand that help's coming. And I believe that. I mean, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. I mean, you know, when you quit treading water, it's over. So you just tread water, and help's on the way. So that was kind of the mental toughness and physical toughness that he instilled in you. And Coach Riggs was a real intense person. Intensity and energy mattered. All those people, and there was teachers, you know, I don't know how far down that road we want to go, but all of them just had this wonderful life lessons. And it was much more applicable to real world scenarios as it was to the athletic event that we were playing. And I think that's what you get through it. I mean, you certainly like to win games, you like to win championships, this, that, and the other, but the lessons you learn that help make you who you are, I think are invaluable.
The unfortunate thing to me is that when, and maybe you were different, I don't know, but when I was going through that, and you talk about teachers, Barbara Page, Beth Bain, Elaine King, I mean, Carolyn Jennings, I mean, all those people, you're right, you were learning something, but I didn't recognize it at the time. It took me to be an adult and have children and live life a little bit before I realized that they were really teaching me something, but I had no idea at the time that they were giving me a life lesson.
I've mentioned, you know, being aware of Coach Best and the commitment he was making as a young person. That doesn't make me a worldly person. I just remember it hitting me. Johnny Folsom, I didn't know that you could have intense band practices. I really didn't. And they were on the field beside us more times than not. And I'm looking over there thinking, I think they've got the worst deal. But once again, he set the bar so high, like the coaches and other teachers, and they gave you resources and gave you love to help you be there, you know, to help you get there. It wasn't like just throwing you in and saying, here's where we want you to get. They gave you tools. They gave you a skill set that would help you be successful. I wouldn't trade positions with any age group that came through than when I did. And I think there's a lot of people that would say it about their group, and they should. I hope it was as good for them as it was for us. But I loved our folks. Loved them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I like to think of that as the golden era of T.R. Miller. But I'm like you. I hope that my daughter, who just graduated last year, and my son, who graduated 2 years ago with your son, will look back on their time and think the same thing. You know, I want people to have the kind of impact on them that they had on you and I when we were coming.
Sure. Well, I want to say something along those lines, if I can, just real quick. When I had my campaign this back summer, it was for City Council District 2. Brewton's not a big town by itself. When you chop it up into 5 districts, it's real manageable from a finance standpoint and getting out and seeing the folks. And I had 2 of my former English teachers make monetary contributions to me in my campaign. There's not much in terms of cost for a district campaign, but I haven't seen either one of them in probably 15 years. And the fact they thought enough of me and remembered me and invested in me like that, it meant the world to me. Like I will never forget that. That, you know, and I wasn't a great English student. Okay, so I mean, it wasn't like I was one of their prize students. Right. I can chop it up pretty good, but they were still investing in me 33 years later. I thought that spoke a lot to who they are as people.
Absolutely. Well, and going back to the qualities on your show primer that we asked you to fill out, and you've already mentioned a couple of them, qualities to be a good leader. One that I can tell you with certainty has not been mentioned in 110 episodes is love, but you've already used that word a couple of times. So expand on that. And we're not talking about the obviously a romantic kind of love, but I mean, you've got to have a love for the people that you want to impact, right?
I think whether it's athletics, whether it's the business world, you name it, if a team is involved, for me, the first building block is love. I think the harder that you can love, the harder that you can coach, the more that you can expect because you know where they're coming from. You know, Garrett was on one of my basketball teams back in the day, and I think he would tell you, I would hope that he would, that there was an investment there as a person. Mm-hmm. I never thought that Garrett was going to play in the NBA.
Right.
I didn't think anybody on that team was ever going to play in the NBA, but we were thrown together for 4 or 5 weeks, and we were going to make it a good experience. And I think you do that through love, and then like trust comes after that. You have to be able to communicate effectively in terms of, you know, what we're trying to get out of this. Mm-hmm. It's not about winning a championship, so to speak. It's about being the best that we can be. Right. And however the chips fall after that, we'll be at peace with it. But love has always been the first building block for me in any team that I've tried to be a part of, and it certainly will be as I work through the city council stuff. I've not disappeared since the campaign trail. I was out yesterday addressing a couple of concerns and needs in the community, and I think it starts there. I don't know if it gets mentioned a lot, but that's
no. Well, I mean, like I said, it hasn't been mentioned in that way at all yet, and I think that's a great insight, and I think it's a great approach to take. So the next thing after love, observe and assess. So I agree. I think in order to be effective, you've got to have some awareness about the situation, right? I mean, you can't just go in blindly and do your thing. You got to.
I'm going to use baseball as an example. When you go out there the first day, everybody wants to pitch or everybody wants to play shortstop. Maybe on teams they've been on before, that's what they want to play. And I've heard some of the things, and this has bothered me down through the years. I've heard it around the ballpark. Well, my kid's in left field or my kid's in right field. And I'm like, what are you saying? I mean, they almost see it. There are folks who see that as almost punishment. Yeah. And I would tell you, in recreational baseball, whoever has the best outfield is going to win the game. Because a lot of times the ball, when it gets put in play out there, it doesn't come back in because they're not worked. They are not trained to play that position. You got to get them out there. You got to observe, you know, who has what talents and how it best fits for the team. And I think anytime you compromise what's best for the team, you're setting yourself up for failure. And that's always been clearly explained to any group I've worked with. It was much easier with boys than it has been with girls. I can tell.
Right.
And I haven't been quite the same coach with the girls as I was the boys. I can assure you that.
That's so true. Speaking of girls, Lindsay, your daughter, she's going to be a little athlete. She's taller than most, or she was, than most kids her age at this point. So, but she's a pretty good little athlete.
I've always coached boys. I said that at the beginning. When I was 18, it's always been boys. Of course, Lindsay comes along, and she messed up and asked me to coach one year, softball when she was 9. So I said, okay, I'll do it. So we got her for the first day, and I don't really have an expectation level just because I've never done it. So we kind of get out there, and I'm pleasantly surprised at what we were able to do on fielding and throwing. I said, okay, this is going to be okay. Well, I go back the second night, and it is completely falling apart. I mean, 10 minutes in, we can't do anything that we just did 18 hours ago. I mean, we can't do anything. So I'm sitting here, my competitive juices are starting to flow a little bit, and there's 9 and 10-year-old girls. I call them up, and I'm fixing to chew on them a little bit. I said, come here, girls. And I put my hands down on my knees and get on their eye level, and they start batting those blue and brown eyes at me. And I said, y'all just keep doing what you're doing. This is great. This is great. This is great. So it was a little different. But one thing I did find out about girls that I thought was very interesting, I didn't know this, is they'll listen. Much more so than the boys will. I mean, the boys, you got to almost ground and pound on them. Yeah. The girls, and that's kind of where I became a better communicator. If you'll tell them what's expected of them, I don't know if it's a maturity level. I don't know what it is, but and it was fun. I really enjoyed that.
Well, you just hit on something that Randy McKinney, our guest, said last week. You have to know how to tailor your communication style and leadership style to who you're leading, right?
Sure,
so you absolutely cannot lead Lindsay the same way that you led Stokes.
No,
for sure.
No. Oh, no.
All right. I want to get to the city of Brewton and that aspect of what you're doing right now in a minute, but I do want to ask one more question. You've been involved in, like you said, youth sports for 27 years, and I've asked this question to a couple of people along the last couple of years that had a perspective to be able to answer it. So how's it different today coaching teenagers? I mean, they have so much to distract them in social media and phones and all the things that we didn't have even when we were coming up, 30, 35 years ago. So what does that look like now? How do you deal with that?
This is going to probably get me in trouble, and I don't necessarily mean this the way it's going to sound. I really don't. Have things changed in society? Yes. Have things become more accepted now that wouldn't have been accepted back in the day? Yes. But I have found, and I'm actually going to do a very unscientific experiment probably this spring, I'm not so sure that the kids have all changed as much as maybe some of the coaches have.
Okay.
I can tell how many problems I have out there, and it's zero.
Okay.
And it goes back to putting those building blocks in place. If you love, if you communicate, if you compete, if you have a positive energy, then I think especially kids want to conform to that. I've always kind of drafted or tried to get some kids who were high strung. I like them. I was always kind of drawn to them. The ones who oftentimes were like that were yearning for somebody to invest in them as people. Yeah. Now, there have been some cases that went much better than others, but I still think it's there to be had. I choose not to use it. Cop-out's probably not the right word, but young people can be coached. I believe that.
Yeah, fair enough. And
I
I agree with you 100%. I do think that sometimes you kind of have to change your tactics and realize the audience that you're kind of talking to and whatnot. But I think you're right. But it does take that intentionality to do that.
You know, maybe now there might need to be more communication with the parents on the front end and say, here's how it's going to go. Okay. If you choose to have your kid play, he's mine from 3 to 5. And I understand how awesome of a responsibility that is. But if you don't want him here, then you need to put him somewhere else. But from 3 to 5, we're going to do it the way I want to do it.
Yeah, and so talk about that just for a second, and we are going to move on, but I just think this is your energy just is, I love it. But so talk about, you hear daddy ball, mama ball, whatever. Yeah. I mean, how do you deal with parents? I mean, I think you just, said a lot in that you're honest and open with them, but I mean, you do have to deal with not only the kids, but the parents and some expectations that might not be realistic. How do you realistically deal with that?
Early on, it was much like I just mentioned. You had to have conversations with the parents, and I think I probably established a little bit of a reputation of being fair to kids, and I'm not there to get my rocks off browbeating a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old, whatever the age group may be, but you just kind of knew if you were on my team, it was going to be this way. I never really had, after maybe 2 or 3 years of parent meetings, I never really had to do that. The parents were always welcome at the practice, and I think if you came from the start of the practice to the end of the practice, I think you would feel good about how your kid was treated. And I'm not telling you that at a point in time in that practice he wasn't coached up a little bit, but before he left there, he knew that it was life lessons to be learned as opposed to what to do with the ball if it's hit to you with less than 2 outs. I mean, that was, I've always, one of my mantras has always been, it's always more than just a game. I mean, the baseball, basketball, football is what brought us together. But if we miss this opportunity to become better people, then we're wasting our time out here. But the activity is while we're here. So while we're here, we might as well beat some folks while we're at it. But but that's certainly not the primary objective.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. All right, let's switch gears just for a second. You put something on your show primer, and I want to kind of equate it to your position now on the city council, but you said everyone's a stakeholder, and I think that that's something that we miss a lot of times, because if I'm in District 5 and you're representing District 2, I may think I don't have a dog in whatever fight that you're involved in, right?
Right.
Or just in the community in general. I mean, if I'm outside the city limits in the county, but I still live within 5 or 10 miles of Brewton, I have a direct interest in what happens in the city. So expand on what you meant by that, and if I'm on the right track as far as kind of what I'm thinking. But everyone's a stakeholder. What does that mean?
Well, I'll go back and I'm going to use the team analogy. Our town, our community, we're a team.
Yeah.
Whether we acknowledge that up front or not, we are. The more people that we have putting hands on the rope and we're all pulling in the same direction, the harder and the more force we can pull with. Everybody is a stakeholder. You may choose to be a silent stakeholder. You may choose to be an inactive stakeholder, but you're in it. Everything we do impacts and affects the rest of us. And I love participation. I love dialogue, even if our opinions are different. I believe, and I believe this about every issue that we face. Reasonable people can find common ground without having to sacrifice what you believe morally and ethically.
Right, yeah.
I just believe that. It may take us a while to get there. There may be different times where you raise your voice and I'll raise my voice. We're both passionate people. It doesn't mean we have to be disrespectful. We want to make sure that each other understands where the other one's coming from, and let's find something that works. And I know that sounds very simplistic in terms of dealing with issues, but I think it can be if people allow themselves to listen. We have an issue coming up in our town now with Sunday alcohol sales. I made a post on Facebook wanting opinions, and I certainly got them. I got a bunch of them, and I enjoy that. I hope there's a time if we can get past this COVID mess where we can sit around and talk about it. I'm one of those. I do better face to face than I do behind a keyboard necessarily. But everybody's a stakeholder, and it's whether it's a playing team or a city team or whatever it is. And if you choose to be active and be a part of it, I think it makes for a more complete picture as opposed to a personal agenda. Yeah, and that's what I yearn for.
Yeah, no doubt. The fact that you love the city of Brewton, I think you couldn't run anybody past you that knows you that wouldn't agree with that. So when you look 4 years down the road, when you decide to run again or whatever whatever you decide to do at the end of your first term, what do you want to have accomplished? I mean, what do you want people to look back and say, okay, David did this for the city of Brewton, he did this for District 2. What are you
There's a couple of things. I want everybody that I'll work on behalf of or work for, however you want to phrase it. When I was asked something, I gave them an answer. And sometimes that answer is, I don't know. A lot of people have it in their mindset that is a show of weakness or whatnot. And I don't. I think it's a little more candid than that. I don't know, Alan. But, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. That's a great question. I'm going to go get you an answer on that. And then I hope that they'll see that the follow-up was there. I hope that transparency is something that is everybody would be aware of. I'm one of those guys, and you know this. I wear my emotions on my sleeve. Sometimes not in a good way. Yeah. But if you ever want to know what I said, you can just ask me. And I'm one of those that will certainly tell you and regurgitate it over and over again because the truth will always stand. And if you ask me what I said a year ago, I can tell you because it was the truth. Yeah. But I hope people see my passion for our town. Like I said, I love the dirt here. I love the people here. My dad was mayor for a long time, and one of the things, I've always been an observer. I'm a people watcher, sometimes to a fault. I can sit there and watch how people react and how they handle a crisis and things of that nature. And he talked about how special the people were here. I remember being, 9 and 10 years old and hearing how special the people in Brewton were. And we are a special lot. Yeah. We have a lot of different personalities. We have a lot of different beliefs, and we face some of the same things that any city in the country faces, whether it's racial, whether it's religious, you name it. And they're serious. And I think a way to hammer that out is through dialogue. I don't think you fix it in your own respective corners. I think you sit around, you keep hammering it. I commit to you, you commit to me that we're going to find something that works for everybody, and we stay at it until it happens. Yeah, that's great. I love that. I could sit here and talk to you the rest of the afternoon. We can't, so we need to start wrapping up. But I do want to ask you a couple of things. We're going to have, in a couple of weeks, our guest is going to be Coach Riggs. Buddy of yours, Tony Burnham. You remember Tony, don't you? Let me check my text. Yeah, I remember him.
Okay. Coach Riggs credits him for saving his job. Do you agree with Coach? He gives him a lot of credit for the fact that he was able to coach for 27 years at T.R. Miller High School. Do you give Tony that kind of credit?
It's a no. I don't. Tony does have a man crush on me. He did play a key role in Coach Riggs getting his career turned around in a short period of time. Yeah. You remember Tony also. They don't make them like him anymore. No, and they're actually moving to Brewton. Excited to have them coming back, actually.
That's great. No, I didn't know that. That's great. Yeah.
I want to share one Coach Riggs story.
Yeah, please do.
And this ties in to how we're different here. I mean, this is how we're growing here. T.R. Miller was playing Sweetwater. This is several years ago. I was doing the radio broadcast for the Tigers, and we had never played Sweetwater. When I say we, T.R. Miller had never played Sweetwater. And for those who were football buffs, Sweetwater has an outstanding football tradition. They've won 5 or 6 state championships. Well, anyway, Jamie lined it up for them to come over here, and I'd gone up to the press box about 4 o'clock that afternoon to get everything set up. And I saw Coach Riggs walking out on the track, and he walked around the track picking up thumbnail-sized pieces of paper. And in his mind, he said, when these people come in here tonight, it's going to meet the expectations of what they've heard. We certainly have a history we're proud of. They were aware of it. And that just it gave me chill bumps watching them do that. That had nothing to do with the outcome of football plays later that night. But he wanted our town. He wanted our campus. He wanted our stadium to present in a way. Coach Roch would have done the same thing if he's still with us. But I remember thinking, that's big. And that's some of the things that you don't get evaluated on when you're maybe observing and assessing a coach. That kind of stuff matters to me. It matters to me.
No, it absolutely does. And you are correct. I mean, the pride that, and still, that we're talking about people that either in Coach Roch's case have passed away or Coach Riggs have retired, and so we're talking about people in the past, but that pride I think is still. Let
me say this. We got great coaches now.
Right.
I've watched Danny Carpenter on Sundays go up there with a bag picking up paper in the parking lot. I'm quite certain that's not on his job description.
Right.
I'm quite certain he doesn't get paid to go up there and pick up the trash, but he does it because it matters. It needs to look a certain way. And Coach Hub's done a great job. Coach Shell, all of them. So this is not about the good old days.
Right.
We're still trending in the right direction, and I'm certainly happy to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, David, one more question. I know that your son and my son are the same age. They're third year in college now. When Stokes looks back on his dad's life, I mean, what's the one lesson that you want Stokes to have come away that you really just instilled in him when he looks back on David Jennings' life?
This is going to be tough for him, and I have actually thought about this quite a bit. I hope it's love. And he got it differently than anybody else I've ever been associated with. I can't tell you, how good it makes me feel when I see somebody that I had during the season. They come up and they say some nice things, and we enjoy a nice moment. And I know that for a long time, Stokes was probably upset at the way that he was treated, and he may still be. We don't go down that path too much, but I hope that he sees that it was love. He's my favorite player of all time.
Yeah,
I've coached 1,000 kids, and he's my number one. Everybody else is tied for second. But I hope that he sees that, and he understands that what I was trying to do was make it work without showing favoritism, because Daddy Ball is present. Not just in Brewton, that's everywhere. But it wasn't present on any teams that Stokes Jennings was on, and anybody that watched it knows it.
No, it was not. I mean, this podcast is going to be required listening for my children. I hope it is for Stokes and Lindsay as well. But thank you so much. Your energy and passion is evident, and I appreciate what you do. So thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes and Spotify. It definitely helps us in the ratings, and it also makes it easier for other folks to find the podcast. And as always, a big thank you to producer and editor Carrie Wolf. Playing Above the Line is sponsored by Avizo Group. If you want to know more about who we are and what we do, you can visit our website at avizogroup.com. That's AVIZO group.com. You can also check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening.